Hello everybody!
Hi again! So today we are back with another recipe from one of our more food inspirational games, Ghost of Thornton Hall. Now this game is full of food inspiration, from the wedding menu to the birthday menus to just like making so much tea.
So much tea.
Today we wanted to pull the fried green tomato recipe because it is pretty much summer. It's actually green tomato season and they just looked really good and we really wanted to eat some. So let's get started. First things first, you're going to want some green tomatoes. If you live in a smaller town where your grocery store options are limited, look for a farmer's market or produce truck in your area. We got these from a local produce truck, but if you live in a bigger town, you should be able to find these at some of your nicer grocery stores. So we're going to use 2 of these today. However big they are is up to you, whether you want larger or smaller slices. We're going to use about like a medium size.
This one is the size of her head.
That one is massive. We'll use it sooner or later, but not today. What we're going to do first is we're going to take our 2 tomatoes and we're going to slice them into about 1/3 of an inch wide rounds. You can do about 1/4 to 1/2 inch thick, but we're going to do about 1/3 today because I don't want them to be super thin and I don't want them to be really thick either. So now that we've sliced our tomatoes, we are going to brine ours to give them a little extra flavor. So we've got a container just a little bit wider than our tomatoes. The size of your container isn't really necessary, but this way we don't have to make as much brine. And we're gonna stack those in here.
Stack them up like a tower.
And then we're gonna take our bits that we cut off the end of our tomatoes and we're just gonna dice that up and throw it in there, and we'll cook that down when it's all done and just eat it as is because it'll be good. We don't want to waste it. So once you're done dicing up your odds and ends of your tomatoes, you're going to take a small saucepan and put it in here, and we're going to cook that down with our brine so that we get those cooked a little more tender while we're at it. So let's talk brine. So we're going to take our small pot and we're going to put 1/2 cup of vinegar in there. You can use either white or cider vinegar. We're already using cider vinegar for something else today, so that's what we're using here. Smells delicious. I love vinegar. We're also going to add 5 tablespoons of sugar, ½ teaspoon of cloves, ½ teaspoon of allspice. We're using whole allspice here. Then we want to add a ½ teaspoon of mustard seed, 1/4 teaspoon of pickling spice. This is what you're looking for right here. Then a 1/4 teaspoon of dry mustard, and a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. In addition to all that, we're going to take ½ of a regular onion, chop that up, and add it to our pot. And then we're going to turn on the stove to either medium or medium high, and we're going to cook that until it comes to a boil. Make sure that we dissolve our sugar and salt and get all of the spices releasing their flavor. So since we're already at it, let's go ahead and cook this until the onions are nice and tender. We're going to go and cut that off, and then all we're going to do now is take our brine and pour it over our tomatoes. So at this point, depending on how big your tomatoes are and how many you used, if it only did like about half the liquid you need, you can go ahead and do a second batch of brine. But if it's pretty close to the top, like ours is only about 3/4 of an inch from the top, we're just going to pour a little more vinegar in to top that off. And now we're going to put this in the fridge and leave it there for It's already the evening here. We're gonna leave it for overnight, but if you don't want to leave it overnight, if you're starting this earlier in the day, I would still give it like a good 4 or 5 hours, if not more, just to make sure that your tomatoes get some of this good flavor soaked in. So let's talk about the second element of the recipe. This is listed on the menu as fried green tomatoes with Vidalia Relish. So let's get started on the Vidalia Relish. Sound good?
Sounds awesome.
Since we're just making enough for this recipe, we're not gonna do a whole lot. We have a large Vidalia onion here, and we're gonna go ahead and dice that up and put it in our pot. In addition to our onion, we are going to add 1.5 teaspoons of salt, 5 tablespoons of white sugar and 1 tablespoon of brown sugar, but if you don't want to bother with using both, go ahead and use 6 tablespoons of white sugar. 5 tablespoons of cider vinegar. Then we're going to add a nice dash of each turmeric and pickling spice. This is optional, but we're also going to add about 1/4 teaspoon or so of diced pimentos. However much pimento you want is really up to you, but we just want a little bit in there. And now we're going to put this on the burner on either medium or medium-low heat, and we're going to cook this for a while until the onions break down and it just really gets nice and soft.
A long time.
Our onions have gotten nice and tender, so all we've got to do now is just transfer it to a container and put it in the fridge until we're ready to use that. I would advise chilling this before you do use it, just so that all the flavors have time to really combine, and also so that if it's going to thicken up, it has a chance to do so. So this is our end result. Honestly, this jar, as you saw, was just barely too small, but that's fine. It's close enough. So we're gonna put this in the fridge now and come back to it tomorrow when we have our tomatoes cooked, and we will give it a try, and hopefully it will be as good as it looks, because this does look pretty great. All right, we're back. It's tomorrow, and we have our tomatoes ready. So let's get started. This part here is gonna be really quick, really easy. We have our tomatoes. We have a bag of breader. This is what we're using today.
Using some spicy breader. We're gonna see how
I do recommend using something, if you can, that has cornmeal in it, just to give it some nice texture. And we've got some of that in a bowl, so we're just gonna take our tomato slices, toss them in the breader, and fry them over medium to medium-high heat in some oil. And just make sure that you cook these until they're golden, and flip them as they're cooking so that they cook evenly.
This should be in one of the Nate Peter games. It feels like it's hard enough.
Yeah, this does feel like a mini game right now, actually. This is what we're working with here. We're gonna plate these and get ready to do some tasting. Yay! This is what the finished product looks like. We put a little dollop of the Vidalia Relish on top of each one. You could serve it on the side, but we figured we'd try it this way. Also, I advise giving it a few minutes to cool off so you don't burn your mouth absolutely to bits. I'm not sure if we waited long enough. We're about to find out.
Let's find out.
So the tomatoes themselves do have a light pickled flavor because we did soak them in brine, but the onion relish is similar, but it's a sweeter and more oniony flavor, so there is still a difference between the two, so that you're not eating just the same thing topped with the same thing. It's nice. I would say this particular one, it wouldn't hurt to have cooked the tomato a little bit longer. It's not like super crunchy, but it's definitely still got a little bit of crispness to it. So depending on how soft you like your tomatoes, you could cut the heat back on the oil a little bit more and cook it for longer.
I think for me, it's the perfect amount of crispness.
Yeah, I do like it here, but if you want yours like soft, then I would either cook it in the oil a little bit longer, or else when you're fixing your brine for the tomatoes, throw them in the pot with your brine for like 4 or 5 minutes max, just to get them a little tender before you marinate them. We were also talking about, before we remembered that it came with the Vidalia Relish, trying it with a dollop of homemade pimento cheese on top.
It definitely needs the relish. By itself, it's a bit plain.
Honestly, I wouldn't mind getting a thicker layer of breader on it next time. Just because it is a very, very thin layer of breading on there. So there's not much actual breading on the tomato. Anyway, that's it for today. At this point in time, we have no idea what our next recipe is going to be. You are as much in the dark as we are. So we get to all discover together when we come back.
Yeah.
And until then, we'll see you all next time with something else highly delicious and fun to make, and maybe it will also feel like a mini game.
This one definitely did for the frying. So very fast paced.
Here's hoping. See y'all later. Bye. Mystery time.
There's a mystery.